What are the most intriguing win totals in the SEC? FanDuel put out some win totals. First things first, FanDuel, stop playing around. Sponsor the hard count. All right, moving right along. Got a few win totals I want us to unpack here together because you look at these and it's a new lay of the land. Like you see the win totals for teams like Texas, who we're not going to talk about right now, teams like Oklahoma, who are joining the SEC, who we will actually talk about. I want to start with Alabama, though. Their over-under win total is 9.5 wins. The post-Saban effect is looking like it's taking place here because Alabama was a college football playoff team last year, and now Vegas is saying, we'll see if they win 10 games. And when you look at Alabama and the task ahead for them, I think there's some fair conversation to be had about it being an uphill climb. Because last year's problem for you in key games, you think the Texas game, the Michigan game, if you're Alabama, how one-dimensional the offense ended up being. Jalen Milroe isn't incapable as a passer, but he wasn't super consistent. And then you lose some key playmakers like a Jermaine Burton, like an Amari Niblack, like a Jermaine Burton, or excuse me, like an Isaiah Bond. I already mentioned Jermaine Burton. Kalen DeBoer's system offensively, what he was so successful with at Washington that gets you fired up, assuming it's a version of that offense that Ryan Grubb ran and is going to probably take with him to Seattle. Whoever the OC is, the bottom line is it's probably with Kalen DeBoer's oversight. Maybe he's the offensive coordinator there too, and I think that would be the way that I would go if I were in Tuscaloosa. I digress. It was with a very different skill set at quarterback with Michael Penix Jr. than what Jalen Milroe brings to the table. It's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that's a very real thing you have to address now going forward in 2024. So what that probably means is you need to ask a little bit more of the defense to hold it down, early on at least, to get the offense rolling a little bit. Now the defense, while there's a lot of talent on that roster, pretty much top 2 classes exclusively in Tuscaloosa, thanks to Nick Saban, even with guys leaving through the portal, there's 33% returning production from a season ago. And the production, again, super talented, a little bit unproven, but the bigger part to me is the leadership you lost with that 33% returning. I mean, that's 66% give or take coming back for you. Curious to see how that looks. Very curious to see how that looks. Now, Malachi Moore will be back for you, obviously, leader of that defense. The schedule for Alabama is not kind. You got Georgia, you're at Tennessee, Missouri, who's going to be a top 10 team. You're at LSU. I would anticipate that being a night game in Baton Rouge. You're at Oklahoma, who knows what they're going to be. And then you got Auburn in Tuscaloosa. And Auburn, quite frankly, feels like they should have beaten you a season ago. It took all the way to 4th and 31 in a superhero play that will go down in history in Tuscaloosa with Jalen Milroe to Isaiah Bond. So to go the over on 9.5 wins, you probably need to be 4-2 in that stretch. That's tough. It's a very difficult gauntlet ahead for Alabama. Very intriguing, though, seeing that 9.5 wins. So we'll see what happens there. Now, this was another one that kind of jumped off the page whenever you first saw the win totals or did this whole win total exercise. Oklahoma, their over-under win total is 7.5 wins. You saw this, and you saw that number next to that logo, and you're like, oh, easy money. 7.5 wins? Oklahoma, outside of that first year for Brent Venables, pretty much wakes up, rolls over out of bed, and they win 10 games. That was kind of how they had gotten down over the course of the last few seasons under Lincoln Riley, and this past season with Brent Venables, once he got his feet underneath him. You take a closer look at this thing, they have 44% production returning back on offense. Got a new quarterback now in Jackson Arnold. Super talented, 5-star cat out of high school. Saw some good things in the bowl game, saw a lot of things that he needs to clean up. And the schedule itself is brutal, too. You got Tennessee, which will be a battle of 5-star quarterbacks, Jackson Arnold and Nico Iamaleava, both from that 2023 class. You're at Auburn. Tough place to play, especially early. That'll be end of September. You got Texas in the Cotton Bowl. Pretty self-explanatory how difficult that will be. You're at Ole Miss. You're at Missouri, both going to be top 10 teams to start the year. You got Alabama, and you got at LSU to finish the season. So if you're Oklahoma, you're looking at this thing and saying, all right, welcome to the SEC, baby. Let's go. And to be clear now, I tweeted about this yesterday saying, hey, Oklahoma, their over-under win total is wild, and so is their schedule in the SEC. Like, I can't wait for this. A lot of the good folks in Norman responded and said, hey, we have no problem earning our keep. We have no problem earning our respect the first year in the conference. So the same sentiment that Texas had last year walking into Tuscaloosa, the same sentiment I think Oklahoma has their first year in the SEC, which is we want all the smoke. Bring it on. We're here for a reason. We're here for it. All right, let's roll. I think the defense is going to be pretty solid. 79% of the production is back from a season ago, including Danny Stutzman, including Jaren Kanak. PJ Adebawore is going to be a stud. Like, he gets another year under his belt. I think the defense will be solid and continue to look Brent Venables-ish. The way that Oklahoma passes that 7.5 win mark is going to fall on Jackson Arnold. Can he find his mojo early and kind of get comfortable as the guy? You saw some good things in that bowl game, but again, you saw a lot of things that made it look like, all right, we got some work to do to get comfortable playing college football. The other part of this, though, for Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold elevating his game and being able to be a steady force for Oklahoma's offense is going to be huge in the sense that it's going to allow Oklahoma to play in different styles of games, most notably games where you have to trade scores. You look at that schedule, there's a lot of teams that you're like, okay, we may get in a shootout with these teams. Texas, you know what you're getting with them offensively. Steve Sarkisian, Ole Miss, LSU, Tennessee. The bottom line there, if you can be able to be steady offensively based on what Jackson Arnold brings to the table, they'll be okay with that 7.5 win total. But I can't wait to watch it. I can't wait to see what happens there. Now, this is a really curious one that I'm excited to see what happens. Texas A&M, 8.5 wins is what Vegas is putting that over-under at. And Oklahoma was a team last year that sort of defied punchline culture and kind of made a lot of people look silly from receipts on Twitter from the year before. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas A&M has a field day with punchline culture, because everybody wants to talk about, well, Texas A&M, they got this much on the roster, they've underachieved this way, and they hired a coach from Duke. Like, say what you want right now. Get all the punchline culture takes off your chest right now, because I think Texas A&M, we're kind of forgetting the fact that one, they have a really good roster still in College Station. Two, they bring a lot of that really good roster back from a season ago with their top 20 returning production in the country. Also, did we forget Connor Wegman's just a really good quarterback from what we've seen so far? I mean, we talk about the ability. We know that's there. Saw some really good things from him early on in the season before he got hurt. The schedule also for Texas A&M is not the worst thing in the world. You got no Georgia. There's no Alabama. And most of your big games for A&M, you get them at home. Notre Dame's at home. Missouri's at home. LSU's at home. Texas is at home. That game against Texas will be absolutely cinema. I can't wait for that. The thing with the A&M now for me, like, the problem with them has never been on paper. It's never been about the roster or them not having the goods within what they do strategically at Texas A&M. Like, it's never been really about, like, the players and their talent level. The issue for A&M over the course of the last couple of years has been direction, has been structure, has been discipline, has been getting the most out of that roster. We'll enter into the fold Mike Elko, and I think he brings exactly what the doctor ordered for A&M. He is that culture. He is that toughness. He is that guy who's done more with less with what he was able to do at Duke. So I'm excited to watch it. I think A&M at that 8.5 number, I would not be surprised in the slightest if we sit here in December of this year and we're saying, yeah, A&M, 10 wins. They popped. They're in the college football playoff. They have that kind of ability on the roster, and Mike Elko, I think, has that direction for them. So that should be really intriguing, one of the most intriguing totals for us when it comes to the SEC and some of these preseason totals. Let's talk about the Georgia Bulldogs here. Because Georgia, they have the highest win total, tied with Texas in the SEC preseason, set at 10.5. And 10.5 feels high for some people, but you look at Georgia and, like, I think we got to use the Kirby Smart gauge. Because 10.5 means they can only lose one football game and no more, right? Because 11 wins, that would be 11-1. If you lose less than that, you're at 10. You hear what you lose more than that, you hear what I'm saying. You lose 2 games, you're at 10-2. You don't hit the over there. Got to use the Kirby Smart gauge when assessing Georgia here, because that roster, I truly believe, is as good as anyone else in the country. Also, you bring back Carson Beck for another year. The dude looked very good his first year in the saddle. Now he and Mike Bobo, get another year to put it together. So much of college football is avoiding that letdown game. Like, it's not about who has the best roster week in and week out. Otherwise, it'd be Georgia, Bama, Ohio State for the most part every single year. But Georgia, and that win total to me is intriguing, because if they're going to lose one game impacts a Kirby Smart coached football team than it does other teams. Like, one loss for Georgia, to me, that impacts them a lot more like a polar plunge than a meltdown. Some teams, they lose one game, they start questioning themselves, they question the way they do things, they question each other, they question their culture. For Georgia, just what I said, It's a polar plunge for them. It's a hard reset. They lose one game. Okay, hey, let's figure this out. Let's get back together. We got that out of our system. Let's go attack. Look at the last couple of years for Georgia. They lost the 2021 SEC title to Alabama. Polar plunge, reset, bounce back, win the national championship over Alabama. 2023, not healthy. They're dinged up. They lose the SEC title to Alabama. They go to the New Year's Six Bowl and just absolutely beat the doors off of Florida State. It's a hard reset for Georgia. That's who they are. So if you're telling me you can have one loss and still hit the over on 10.5 wins, I like that a lot. I like that a whole heck of a lot from a Georgia Bulldog fan. Last one I want to get to here, Tennessee. Over under 8.5 wins. A lot of 8.5s here for the good folks in Las Vegas. Very interesting path to over 8.5 wins. They have a dense schedule, not overly brutal. They have Bama. They're at Georgia, which are obviously going to be very difficult tasks in themselves. No LSU. No Ole Miss. They play Florida, but they play them in Knoxville, and Florida just has been a little bit of a tricky task for the Vols over the course of the last couple of seasons. 94th in returning production is Tennessee. So you see their schedule, you say, okay, I guess I see a path there. Then you see how much they don't bring back. New quarterback in Nico Iamaleava. This number to me tells me two things about how Vegas perceives Tennessee. The first, they feel like with what Tennessee has on that roster, this schedule is manageable. That's how they feel about it. The second, though, they are accounting for Nico being that dude. That's the only way that I look at this thing. I think they believe that Nico Iamaleava could end up being that guy that propels Tennessee to over 8.5 wins. Because 94th returning production, you would imagine that total to be a little bit lower. 8.5 feels generous for a team that brings back not a ton on either side of the football. But we've seen how this offense can work when it has the guy playing quarterback. We saw Hendon Hooker run this offense to over 40 points a game and beating Alabama and having a tremendous season. Like, we've seen what it can look like with the right pilot. Now, with Nico entering the fold, the top player from the 2023 class, I don't think it is a stretch to believe that that could be Tennessee yet again in 2024. So a lot of intriguing win totals out there. Again, FanDuel, get it together, sponsor the show. But I'm excited to watch what these win totals end up looking like and how we call our shot here when it comes to a little bit closer to the season. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.